Billionaire was alone in a cafe on Christmas. When his ex walked in with their daughter, not knowing he was there before we begin, drop a comment telling us which city you're watching from. And once the story ends, don't forget to rate it from 0 to 10. Oh, and make sure to follow our channel for more stories like this. Now, sit back and enjoy every detail. The December wind cut through downtown Seattle like a knife, sending pedestrians hurrying past the warm glow of Cornerstone Cafe's windows. Inside, the familiar scent of cinnamon and freshly ground coffee beans wrapped around the few customers who had chosen to spend their Christmas Eve in the quiet sanctuary of the small establishment. Ethan Calloway sat in the corner booth, the same one he'd claimed every Christmas for the past 2 years. His long fingers wrapped around a ceramic mug that had grown cold an hour ago, but he made no move to signal the waitress for a refill. The charcoal wool coat draped over his broad shoulders was custom-tailored, probably worth more than most people's monthly salary, yet he looked oddly out of place, like a man playing dress-up in someone else's expensive life. At 32, Ethan had the kind of presence that commanded boardrooms and made stock prices fluctuate with a single statement. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his jawline sharp enough to cut glass, and his steel blue eyes usually held the confidence of someone who'd built an empire from nothing. But today, those eyes held something different, something hollow. He stared at the empty chair across from him, remembering how Natalie used to steal his French fries and laugh at her own terrible jokes, how she'd curl her auburn hair around her finger when she was thinking, or how her green eyes would light up when she talked about her dreams of running her own consulting firm someday. 2 years, 3 months, and 16 days since he'd walked away from the only woman he'd ever loved. The fintech company that had been hemorrhaging money back then now generated billions in revenue annually. Callaway Digital had offices in 12 countries, and Ethan's name regularly appeared on Forbes's lists. He owned penthouse apartments, luxury cars, and had more zeros in his bank account than he could have imagined in his wildest dreams. Yet every Christmas Eve, he found himself in this same cafe, drowning in memories of what he'd lost. The bell above the door chimed softly, and Ethan didn't look up. He'd learned to tune out the world during these annual pilgrimages to his past, but then he heard it, a laugh that made his chest tighten with recognition. "Careful, sweetheart." The door's heavy. Ethan's head snapped up and the world seemed to tilt on its axis. Natalie Brooks stood in the doorway, gently maneuvering a stroller through the entrance. She looked different. Her auburn hair was shorter now, falling in soft waves just past her shoulders instead of the long cascade he remembered. She wore a cream-colored peacoat that accentuated her petite frame, and there was something in her posture, a confidence, a self-assurance that hadn't been there before. But it was her eyes that stopped him cold. Those same emerald eyes that had haunted his dreams, now focused entirely on the small passenger in the stroller, a little girl with dark curls and curious steel blue eyes that looked remarkably familiar. Ethan's breath caught in his throat as Natalie unbuckled the child and lifted her onto her hip. The little girl couldn't be more than a year old, wearing a tiny red dress with white tights and black Mary Jane shoes that barely covered her feet. She clutched a worn brown teddy bear against her chest. "Mama, Café?" the little girl babbled, pointing at the coffee counter with chubby fingers. "Yes, baby. We're getting hot chocolate for you and coffee for Mama," Natalie replied, her voice softer than Ethan remembered, tinged with the patience that only motherhood seemed to bring. Natalie approached the counter, completely unaware that her past was sitting 15 feet away, watching her every move with the intensity of a man who'd just seen a ghost. The barista, a college-aged girl with purple streaks in her hair, smiled warmly at the pair. "The usual, Natalie? Hot chocolate with extra marshmallows for the little princess? Please, Maya. And I'll take a large vanilla latte. We've had a long morning at the pediatrician." As Natalie reached into her purse to pay, the little girl squirmed in her arms and the teddy bear slipped from her grasp. It fell to the floor with a soft thud, landing directly in the aisle between the counter and Ethan's table. The child immediately began to fuss, reaching toward her fallen companion. "Teddy, Mama, Teddy." "I've got it, sweetheart," Natalie said, starting to bend down while still balancing her daughter. But Ethan was already moving. His body acted before his mind could catch up, and he found himself crossing the small space in 3 long strides. He bent down and retrieved the soft brown bear, straightening slowly as he found himself face to face with the woman he'd never stopped loving. Natalie's eyes widened in shock, her lips parting in a small O of surprise. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The cafe seemed to fade around them, the soft Christmas music and distant conversations becoming nothing more than white noise. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Hello, Natalie." His voice was rougher than he'd intended, thick with emotions he'd spent years trying to bury. The little girl in her arms looked between them with the innocent curiosity of a child who sensed tension, but didn't understand it. She reached out toward Ethan, drawn to the teddy bear in his hands. "Teddy, please," she said sweetly, her steel blue eyes meeting his. Ethan's world stopped completely. Those eyes, they were his eyes. The same steel blue color, the same shape, even the same long lashes his mother had always said he'd inherited from his grandmother. His gaze flew to Natalie's face, searching for answers he wasn't sure he was ready to hear. She was watching him with a mixture of fear, defiance, and something that looked almost like relief. "Is she?" he began, but couldn't finish the question that was burning in his throat. Natalie's chin lifted slightly, that familiar stubborn streak he'd fallen in love with shining through her shock. "Her name is Amelia," she said quietly. "She's 18 months old." The math was simple, devastating, life-changing. Ethan handed the teddy bear to the little girl, to Amelia, and watched as she hugged it tightly against her chest. She smiled at him then, a radiant, innocent smile that shattered something deep inside his chest. "Thank you," Natalie said, her professional mask sliding into place even as her hands trembled slightly. "We should go." But as she turned toward the door, Amelia dropped her teddy bear again, this time deliberately, her eyes fixed on Ethan as if she somehow knew that he was important, that this moment would change everything. What choice would you have made if you were Ethan in that moment? Let them walk away again or fight for the chance to know the daughter you never knew existed? The teddy bear lay between them like a bridge neither was ready to cross. Ethan knelt down slowly, his expensive suit creasing against the cafe floor as he retrieved the toy for the second time. When he straightened, Amelia was studying his face with the intense curiosity that only toddlers possessed, as if she could see something in him that the adults couldn't. "She has your eyes," Natalie whispered, the words escaping before she could stop them. The admission hung in the air between them, heavy with implications. Ethan's jaw clenched, his knuckles white as he gripped the teddy bear. "Why didn't you tell me?" His voice was barely controlled, each word measured and precise in the way that had made him legendary in boardrooms across the country. Natalie shifted Amelia to her other hip, the movement protective and instinctive. "Tell you what exactly? You disappeared, Ethan. No forwarding address, no phone number, no social media presence. You became a ghost. I left you a note." "A note?" Her laugh was sharp, brittle. 3 sentences about how you couldn't give me the life I deserved? That wasn't communication, that was cowardice. The barista with purple streaks glanced over nervously, clearly sensing the tension radiating from the corner where they stood. A few other customers had begun to stare, though none seemed to recognize the billionaire whose face graced magazine covers worldwide. Amelia babbled something incomprehensible and reached again for her teddy bear. Ethan looked down at her small, outstretched hand and felt something crack open inside his chest. Without thinking, he handed her the toy, and their fingers brushed for just a moment. "Dada?" Amelia said suddenly, pointing at Ethan with the casual innocence of a child who had no concept of the chaos she was creating. Natalie's face went pale. "She calls all men that," she said quickly, too quickly. "It's just a phase." But Ethan had caught the slight tremor in her voice, the way her grip on Amelia had tightened protectively. He'd spent years learning to read people's tells in negotiations worth billions of dollars, and Natalie had never been good at hiding her emotions from him. "How old did you say she was?" he asked quietly. 18 months. "And when's her birthday?" Natalie's green eyes flashed with something between anger and panic. "June 12th. Ethan did the math instantly. June meant conception in September or October. They'd been together then. They didn't break up until January 15th. The timeline fit perfectly, and they both knew it. "Natalie," his voice was softer now, almost pleading. "Please, I need to know." For a moment, she looked exactly like the young woman he'd fallen in love with 3 years ago, vulnerable, conflicted, and desperately trying to be braver than she felt. But then her shoulders squared and he saw the steel that had been forged in his absence. "You need to know?" she repeated, her voice gaining strength. "Where was that need when I was throwing up every morning for 4 months? Where was it when I was working double shifts to pay for prenatal vitamins because my insurance was garbage? When I was lying awake at 3 a.m. wondering how I was going to raise a baby alone?" Each word hit him like a physical blow. Ethan had imagined many scenarios over the years, Natalie moving on, finding someone else, building the life he'd thought he couldn't give her. But he'd never imagined this. Never imagined that she'd needed him while he was busy becoming the man he thought she deserved. "I didn't know," he said helplessly.
"If I had known, you would have what? Come running back out of obligation? Built a family out of guilt instead of love?" Natalie shook her head, her auburn hair catching the warm light from the cafe's Edison bulbs. "I couldn't do that to myself, or to her." Amelia had grown restless in her mother's arms, and was now reaching toward the colorful Christmas garland that decorated the cafe's windows. She babbled happily, oblivious to the adult drama unfolding around her. "You still haven't answered my question," Ethan said, his voice rough with emotion. Natalie looked at him for a long moment, and he saw the exact instant she made her decision. Her chin lifted, and when she spoke, her voice was clear and steady. "Yes, she's yours." The words hit him like a thunderbolt. Ethan had to grip the back of a nearby chair to steady himself as the full weight of her confession settled over him. He had a daughter, a beautiful, perfect daughter who had been living and breathing and growing for over a year without him knowing she existed. "My God," he breathed. "Natalie, don't." She held up her free hand to stop him. "Don't say you're sorry. Don't say you would have done things differently. The past is the past, and I've made peace with it." But even as she said the words, Ethan could see the cracks in her armor, the way her hand shook slightly as she adjusted Amelia's position, the dark circles under her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and endless worry, the wedding ring that was notably absent from her finger, telling him that she'd faced this alone. "Have you?" he asked quietly. "Made peace with it?" For just a moment her mask slipped completely and he saw the exhaustion underneath, the weight of single motherhood, of carrying the burden of his absence for over a year. But then she straightened again, and the professional, competent woman was back. "I've had to," she said simply. Amelia dropped her teddy bear again, and this time it rolled under a nearby table. Without hesitation, both Ethan and Natalie moved to retrieve it, their heads nearly colliding as they reached for the toy simultaneously. They froze, faces inches apart, and for a moment the years fell away. He could smell her perfume, something light and floral that he didn't recognize, and see the faint freckles across her nose that only appeared when she spent time in the sun. Her lips were slightly parted, and he remembered exactly how they tasted, how she used to sigh his name when he kissed her. "Natalie," he whispered. She jerked back as if he'd burned her, snatching the teddy bear from his grasp. "We have to go," she said, her voice unsteady. "Amelia needs her nap, and I have things to do." But as she turned toward the door with their daughter, Ethan's voice stopped her. "I want to be her father." The words hung in the air between them, simple and devastating in their honesty. Natalie didn't turn around, but he saw her shoulders tense beneath her cream-colored coat. "You don't get to want that," she said quietly. "You gave up that right when you walked away. Then let me earn it back." This time she did turn, and the look in her eyes was a mixture of longing and fear that made his chest ache. "Some things can't be earned back, Ethan. Some things once broken, stay broken." She was almost to the door when Amelia looked back over her mother's shoulder and waved at him with her tiny hand. Her face lit up with the guileless smile of a child who saw only possibility where adults saw complications. And as the door closed behind them, taking his daughter away from him for the second time in his life, Ethan realized that he would move heaven and earth to prove Natalie wrong. 3 days after Christmas, Natalie sat in her cramped home office, staring at the stack of invoices that needed her attention. The small apartment she rented in Capitol Hill was a far cry from the spacious house she'd once shared with Ethan, but it was theirs, hers and Amelia's, and that meant everything. The afternoon light filtered through sheer curtains, casting gentle shadows across the second-hand desk she'd bought from a college student on Craigslist. Amelia was napping in her crib, finally worn out from a morning of toddler chaos that had included finger-painting the kitchen cabinets and an impromptu tea party with her stuffed animals. Natalie should have been focusing on the Henderson project proposal that was due by 5 p.m., but her mind kept drifting back to steel blue eyes, and the way Ethan's voice had cracked when he'd said he wanted to be Amelia's father. Her phone buzzed against the desk, jolting her from her thoughts. The number was unlisted, but something in her chest told her exactly who it was. "Hello? Natalie, it's Ethan." She closed her eyes, gripping the phone tighter. "How did you get this number?" "I have resources." His voice was careful, measured. "I need to see you to talk." "We talked in the cafe, that was enough." No, it wasn't. There was something raw in his tone that made her stomach flutter despite herself. "Please, give me 1 hour."
That's all I'm asking. Natalie stood and walked to the window, looking down at the quiet street below. A woman was pushing a stroller past the bare maple trees, and the sight made her chest tighten. Ethan, this isn't... I know about the therapy sessions. Her blood turned to ice. What? Dr. Patricia Manning. Wednesdays at 3 p.m. You've been seeing her for anxiety and insomnia since Amelia was born. How could you possibly know that? Her voice was barely a whisper. Because I've been trying to understand what you went through, what I put you through when I left. His admission was quiet, almost ashamed. I hired someone to... You had me investigated? The words exploded from her, fury replacing shock. Are you insane? Natalie, please just listen. No. She was pacing now, her free hand clenched into a fist. You disappeared for over 2 years and now you think you can just waltz back into my life and violate my privacy? My daughter's privacy? She's my daughter too. The simple statement hit her like a slap. Natalie sank onto her small couch, suddenly exhausted by the weight of a secret she'd carried alone for so long. That doesn't give you the right to spy on us, she said, but some of the fire had gone out of her voice. You're right. It doesn't. I was desperate to know if you were okay, if she was okay. The investigator only looked at public records and... Stop. Natalie pressed her free hand to her forehead, feeling the familiar tension that usually preceded her anxiety attacks. Just stop talking for a minute. Silence stretched between them, broken only by the distant sound of traffic and Amelia's soft breathing through the baby monitor. I know I handled this wrong, Ethan said finally. Everything about this has been wrong since the moment I walked away from you. But Natalie, I can't unknow that I have a daughter. I can't pretend that the last 15 months of her life don't matter to me. Despite herself, Natalie felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. You don't know anything about the last 15 months. Then tell me. Something in his voice, a vulnerability she'd never heard before, even in their most intimate moments, made her defenses crack just slightly. Tell you what, about the nights when she had colic and I walked the floors until sunrise wondering if I was completely failing her? About the time she got pneumonia at 8 months and I spent 3 days in the hospital thinking I might lose her? Her voice broke on the last words. About how I had to explain to my parents that no, the father wouldn't be coming to her first birthday party because he didn't even know she existed. Each revelation was like a knife to his heart, and Ethan closed his eyes, leaning against the floor-to-ceiling windows of his downtown penthouse. Far below, the city sparkled in the winter afternoon light, but he barely saw it. God, Natalie, I'm so sorry. Sorry doesn't give me back those months of sleep I lost. Sorry doesn't erase the panic attacks I had every time I thought about raising her alone. Her breath was coming faster now, the familiar tightness building in her chest. Are you having one now? A panic attack? His question was so gentle, so knowing, that it stopped her spiraling thoughts cold. He'd always been able to read her tells, even when she tried to hide them. I'm fine, she lied, pressing her hand to her chest where her heart was racing. 4 deep breaths, he said quietly. In for 4 counts, hold for 4, out for 4. Remember? You used to do it when you got overwhelmed at work. Despite herself, Natalie found herself following his instructions, her breathing gradually slowing to a more normal rhythm. The fact that he remembered such a small detail about her made something ache deep in her chest. I want to help, he said when her breathing had steadied. Not because I feel guilty, though I do, but because I love her already, even though I've only met her once, and because I never stopped loving you. The confession hung between them, devastating in its honesty. Love isn't enough, she whispered. It wasn't enough 3 years ago, and it's not enough now. What if I could prove that I've changed, that the man who walked away isn't the man I am now? How? Let me show you. Give me a chance to be the father she deserves, and the man you needed me to be before. Natalie closed her eyes, torn between the part of her that still loved him desperately, and the part that had learned to protect herself and her daughter from the pain of abandonment. 1 coffee, she said finally. Tomorrow, 2 p.m. at the cafe where you found us. Amelia comes with me, and if at any point I want to leave, you don't follow us. You don't call. You don't have us investigated again. Do you understand? Yes. And Ethan, if you hurt her, if you let her get attached to you and then disappear again, I will make sure you regret it for the rest of your life. The steel in her voice reminded him exactly why he'd fallen in love with her in the first place. Natalie Brooks had always been fierce when it came to protecting the people she loved, and apparently motherhood had only sharpened that instinct. I won't hurt her, he promised. I won't hurt either of you. Not again. After she hung up, Natalie sat in her quiet apartment and wondered if she was making the biggest mistake of her life. Through the baby monitor, she could hear Amelia stirring from her nap, making the soft, cooing sounds that meant she'd wake up happy and ready to play. As she walked to the nursery to get her daughter, Natalie couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. Again. And this time, she wasn't sure if she was strong enough to survive it if things went wrong. Ethan arrived at Cornerstone Café 20 minutes early, claiming the same corner booth where he'd sat on Christmas Eve. His hands were steady as he adjusted his charcoal sweater, cashmere but not ostentatious, and checked his watch for the third time in 5 minutes. He'd changed clothes twice that morning, settling on dark jeans and the sweater because he wanted to look approachable, not intimidating. At exactly 2 p.m. the door chimed, and Natalie entered with Amelia strapped to her chest in a baby carrier. She wore dark jeans, ankle boots, and a forest green sweater that brought out her eyes. Her auburn hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and she looked every inch the competent, beautiful woman he'd fallen in love with, but with an edge of wariness that hadn't been there before. Amelia's dark curls peeked out from under a tiny knit hat, and when she spotted Ethan across the cafe, she immediately began babbling and pointing in his direction. "Dada! Dada!" she squealed, her chubby arms reaching toward him. Natalie's face flushed pink. "She's been doing that all morning," she said quickly, approaching his table. "I think she remembers you from before." Ethan stood as they approached, his heart hammering against his ribs. "May I?" He gestured toward the baby carrier straps. Natalie hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "She's been fussy today. Fair warning." But as soon as Ethan carefully lifted Amelia from the carrier, she settled against him with a contented sigh that made his chest ache with emotion. She was warm and solid and real, and she smelled like baby shampoo and something indefinably sweet. "Hello, beautiful girl," he murmured, and Amelia responded by grabbing a handful of his sweater and grinning up at him with 4 tiny white teeth. Natalie slid into the booth across from him, watching with an expression caught between amazement and terror. She usually doesn't warm up to strangers that quickly. "Maybe she knows," Ethan said softly, adjusting Amelia on his lap so she could see both him and her mother. "Maybe somehow she knows I'm her dad." The word dad hung in the air between them, foreign and precious. Natalie looked down at her hands, which were clasped tightly on the table. "I ordered for you," Ethan said, nodding toward the vanilla latte that sat cooling beside her. "I remembered. You remember how I like my coffee, but you couldn't remember to leave me a way to contact you when you decided to disappear." The words came out sharper than she'd intended. Ethan's jaw tightened. "I remember everything about you, Natalie. Every morning you hummed while you made breakfast. The way you always stole the sports section even though you never read it. How you cried during every romantic movie, even the terrible ones." He paused, bouncing Amelia gently when she started to fuss. "I remember all of it because forgetting would have killed me. But leaving didn't. Leaving almost did kill me." His voice was quiet, raw, but I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought you deserved better than a man whose business was failing, who couldn't even afford to take you out to dinner without checking his bank balance first. Natalie's laugh was bitter. "You thought I cared about dinner? About money? Ethan, I was ready to move into a studio apartment with you. I was ready to eat ramen noodles for a year if it meant we were together. I know that now." He looked down at Amelia, who had grabbed his finger and was studying it with intense concentration. "But then, I felt like I was drowning and I was terrified I was going to pull you down with me. So instead you just let me drown alone." The accusation hit its mark, and Ethan closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, they were bright with unshed tears. "Tell me about the pregnancy," he said quietly. "Please, I need to know." Natalie was quiet for a long moment, sipping her latte and watching Amelia play with the buttons on Ethan's sweater. When she finally spoke, her voice was carefully controlled. "I found out in November, 2 months before you left. I took 3 tests because I couldn't believe it." She smiled sadly. "I was terrified and excited and heartbroken all at the same time. I kept wanting to tell you, but you were so stressed about the business and I was scared it would make everything worse. The morning sickness was brutal. I lost 15 pounds in the first trimester because I couldn't keep anything down. My boss threatened to fire me twice because I kept missing work." She paused, her voice growing softer. "I used to talk to her, to you, in my belly. I'd tell you about your daddy, about how smart and funny and stubborn he was, how much I missed him." Ethan had to clear his throat before he could speak. "What else?" "The night she was born, there were complications. My blood pressure spiked, and for a while, The doctors weren't sure if we were both going to be okay. Natalie's voice cracked slightly. All I could think about was how you should have been there. How you should have been the one holding my hand and telling me everything would be all right. God, Natalie, I'm so sorry. She came 3 weeks early, barely 5 pounds. Spent her first week in the NICU. Natalie reached across the table to stroke Amelia's cheek, and their daughter immediately grabbed her finger. I slept in those awful plastic chairs, afraid to leave her alone. Afraid something would happen and she'd think I'd abandoned her too. The words were a knife to his heart, and Ethan had to blink back tears. I would have been there, if I'd known, but you didn't know, because you made sure I couldn't tell you. Natalie's voice was steady, but her eyes were bright with emotion. Do you understand what that did to me? What it's still doing to me? Before Ethan could respond, Amelia started to fuss, arching her back and reaching for her mother. Natalie gathered her close, and Amelia immediately calmed, tucking her face against her mother's neck. She's hungry, Natalie explained, checking her watch. I need to feed her. Of course. Ethan started to stand. I'll give you privacy. You don't have to leave. The words surprised them both. Natalie looked as shocked as Ethan felt. I mean, if you want to stay, she should get used to having you around. If you're serious about this. Ethan sat back down slowly. I've never been more serious about anything in my life. As Natalie discreetly began nursing Amelia, Ethan found himself memorizing the scene, the way his daughter's tiny hand rested against her mother's sweater, the peaceful expression on both their faces, the afternoon light streaming through the window and turning Natalie's hair to burnished copper. I've thought about this moment 1,000 times, he said quietly, meeting her, watching you with her, but I never imagined it would hurt this much. Hurt? Knowing what I missed, what I can never get back. He met her eyes across the table. Her first smile, her first word, the first time she slept through the night. Her first word was Mama, Natalie said softly. But her second was Dada. She used to say it to everyone. The mailman, the grocery store clerk, men on the street. I think she was looking for you. The confession broke something open inside Ethan's chest, and he had to grip the edge of the table to steady himself. I want to make this right, he whispered. I want to be the father she's been looking for, and the man you needed me to be 3 years ago. Just tell me how. Natalie looked down at Amelia, who had fallen asleep in her arms, and then back at Ethan. For the first time since Christmas Eve, her expression was soft, vulnerable. I don't know if you can, she admitted. I don't know if I know how to trust you again, but maybe. She paused as if the words were too dangerous to say out loud. Maybe we could try to figure it out together. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet, but it was hope, and for Ethan, it was everything. 2 weeks later, Ethan found himself standing outside Natalie's apartment building with a bag of groceries and a nervous flutter in his stomach that reminded him of their first date years ago. The January rain had turned to sleet, coating the sidewalks in a treacherous glaze, but he barely noticed the cold. Since their coffee meeting, they'd established a tentative routine. He would visit twice a week for an hour, always at Natalie's invitation, always on her terms. They were careful around each other, polite and distant, like strangers learning to navigate shared space. But Amelia had no such reservations about her father. Natalie answered the door in yoga pants and an oversized Seattle University sweatshirt, her hair pulled up in a messy ponytail. She looked exhausted, and there were dark circles under her eyes that hadn't been there the week before. You look tired, Ethan said, stepping inside and shaking the sleet from his coat. Amelia's been fighting a cold. She was up most of the night. Natalie closed the door behind him, then paused. Actually, she's been asking for you. Asking for me? She keeps saying Dada and pointing at the door. I think she's figured out that you come to visit. There was something wistful in her voice. She's been carrying that teddy bear everywhere since Christmas Eve. As if summoned by their conversation, Amelia appeared in the doorway to the living room, clutching her brown teddy bear and wearing footy pajamas covered in tiny elephants. Her nose was red from her cold, but her face lit up when she saw Ethan. Dada! She squealed, toddling toward him with outstretched arms. Ethan dropped the grocery bag and scooped her up, his heart doing that familiar flip it had been doing every time she called him that. Hey, princess, how are you feeling? Amelia babbled something incomprehensible and pressed her stuffy nose against his neck, content to be held. Over her head, Ethan met Natalie's eyes. I brought soup, he said, nodding toward the abandoned grocery bag. And some of those crackers she likes. I thought maybe I could cook for you both. Natalie's eyebrows rose. You cook now? I learned, He shifted Amelia to his hip, marveling at how natural the movement had become. Turns out when you live alone for 2 years, you either learn to cook or survive on takeout forever. And which did you choose? Both, he admitted with a small smile. But I got pretty good at soup. Something in Natalie's expression softened. Okay, but I'm not changing any diapers. That's your initiation. The next hour passed in a domestic bubble that felt both foreign and achingly familiar. Ethan cooked while Natalie folded laundry, and Amelia entertained herself by playing with wooden spoons and empty containers on the kitchen floor. It was ordinary and perfect and everything Ethan hadn't known he'd wanted until it was too late. She's getting attached to you, Natalie said quietly as they watched Amelia from the kitchen table. Their daughter was absorbed in trying to fit blocks into a shape-sorting toy, her tongue poking out in concentration. Is that a bad thing? Natalie was quiet for a moment, stirring her soup without really eating it. I don't know. Maybe. What happens when the novelty wears off? When you realize that being a father isn't just fun visits and grocery shopping? When she's screaming at 3 a.m. because she's teething? Or when she has a tantrum in the middle of Target because you won't buy her a toy? Then I'll deal with it, Ethan said simply. Just like you do. But you don't have to. That's the difference. You could walk away tomorrow and legally, I couldn't stop you. You could decide this is too hard or too messy or not what you wanted, and Amelia and I would just have to accept it. The fear in her voice was raw, unguarded, and it hit him like a physical blow. Natalie, I can't do that again. Her voice cracked. I can't let her love you and then lose you, and I can't. She stopped, pressing her lips together. You can't what? I can't fall for you again just to have you disappear when things get complicated. The admission hung between them, honest and devastating. Ethan reached across the table and covered her hand with his. And for once, she didn't pull away. I'm not going anywhere, he said firmly. Not this time. Not ever. You can't promise that. Yes, I can. His voice was steady, certain, because I know what it feels like to live without you both now. I know what I lost when I walked away, and I'm never making that mistake again. Natalie looked down at their joined hands, and he could see the war playing out across her face. Hope warring with fear, love battling self-preservation. I want to believe you, she whispered. Then let me prove it to you. Before she could respond, Amelia started fussing, her blocks forgotten as her cold made her miserable. Natalie started to get up, but Ethan was already moving. I've got her, he said, lifting Amelia into his arms. Come here, baby girl. You don't feel good, do you? Amelia snuggled against his chest, and Ethan began to pace the small living room, rubbing soothing circles on her back. Without thinking, he started humming a lullaby his own mother had sung to him, and gradually Amelia's fussing subsided. Natalie watched from the doorway, her heart doing dangerous things in her chest. There was something about seeing Ethan comfort their daughter, that broke down walls she'd spent months building. She never settles that quickly for me when she's sick, she said softly. Maybe she just needed her dad, Ethan replied, not looking away from Amelia's peaceful face. The word dad still felt new and precious on his tongue, but it was getting easier to say. More natural, like a role he'd been born to play but had taken too long to audition for. Ethan? Natalie's voice was barely above a whisper. I need you to understand something. If we do this, if we try to build something together, there can't be any secrets between us. No more investigations, no more disappearing acts, no more making decisions about our family without talking to me first. Our family, he repeated, testing the words. I like the sound of that. I'm serious. So am I. He turned to face her fully, Amelia still drowsing in his arms. Complete honesty, complete transparency, whatever you need to feel safe. Natalie nodded slowly, and Ethan could see her making a decision that terrified and exhilarated her in equal measure. There's something I need to tell you, she said, about why I was really at the cafe on Christmas Eve. Ethan felt his stomach drop. What do you mean? I've been going there every Christmas since Amelia was born, not because of the hot chocolate or because it's convenient. She took a deep breath. I've been going there because I hoped that someday, somehow, you might come back, that maybe you'd remember how much we both loved that place and you'd find us there. The confession shattered something inside his chest. All this time he'd thought he was the only one holding on to the past, the only one trapped in the same cycle of hope and heartbreak. Natalie, he breathed. I never stopped loving you either, she whispered, tears spilling down her cheeks. Even when I hated you, even when I was so angry I could barely see straight, I never stopped hoping you'd come home. Ethan closed the distance between them carefully, mindful of the sleeping child in his arms. When he was close enough, he reached out and wiped a tear from her cheek with his thumb. "I am home," he said softly. "This is home. You and Amelia. You're everything I never knew I needed, and everything I was too afraid to fight for before." Natalie leaned into his touch, and for a moment they stood like that. A family, fragile and new and full of possibility. But just as Ethan thought they might finally be finding their way back to each other, his phone rang, shattering the moment. He glanced at the screen and cursed under his breath. "I have to take this, it's my lawyer. At 8 p.m. on a Wednesday? Marcus only calls this late when it's urgent." Ethan handed Amelia to Natalie and answered the call. "What is it, Marcus?" Natalie couldn't hear the other side of the conversation, but she watched Ethan's face go white, then hard as granite. "When?" he asked tersely. "How much do they know?" A long pause, then, "Handle it. Do whatever you have to do, but handle it." When he hung up, the domestic tranquility of the evening felt suddenly fragile, like a soap bubble about to burst. "What's wrong?" Natalie asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, the gesture achingly familiar. "Someone leaked information about you and Amelia to the press. Apparently there are photographers outside your building right now." Natalie's blood turned to ice as she processed Ethan's words. "Photographers here? How did they—" "I don't know." Ethan was already moving toward the window, careful to stay out of sight as he peered through the blinds. Sure enough, he could see the telltale glint of camera lenses across the street. "But we need to get you and Amelia out of here now." "Out of here?" Natalie's voice rose in panic, causing Amelia to stir in her arms. "This is my home, Ethan. I'm not running away because some vultures want pictures. Natalie, you don't understand what this is like. Once they have your address, your life isn't your own anymore. They'll camp outside your building, follow you to work, take pictures of Amelia at the playground." His voice was grim with experience. "I won't let that happen to her." "You won't let it?" The steel was back in Natalie's voice. "You don't get to make that decision for us." Before Ethan could respond, his phone rang again. The caller ID showed a number he recognized. Rebecca Chen, his publicist and crisis management specialist. "Rebecca, please tell me you have good news." "I wish I could, Ethan. Someone sold photos from Christmas Eve to Celebrity Insider. The story breaks online in 2 hours. Print edition tomorrow morning. The headline is Billionaire's Secret Baby, Ethan Calloway's Hidden Family Revealed." Ethan closed his eyes, feeling the weight of his past decisions crushing down on him. "How bad is it? They have pictures of you three in the cafe, and somehow they got Natalie's full name and address. They're calling her your mystery woman, and speculating about a love child scandal. It's going to get ugly fast." Natalie had moved closer during the conversation, and her face had gone pale as she caught fragments of what Rebecca was saying. "What do we do?" Ethan asked. "Damage control. I can arrange security for Natalie and the baby. Get them somewhere safe until this blows over. We need to control the narrative before it controls us. Do it." Ethan didn't hesitate. "Whatever it costs." "Actually," Rebecca's voice took on a different tone, "there might be another option. If you were willing to give an exclusive interview, something to humanize the story, show that this isn't a scandal but a love story, we could spin this positively." "Absolutely not." Ethan's response was immediate and fierce. "I'm not putting them through that circus." He ended the call and turned to find Natalie staring at him with an expression he couldn't read. "Security?" she asked quietly. "You want to assign security to us like we're some kind of assets that need protecting? That's not what I meant, isn't it?" Her voice was deadly calm. "This is exactly what I was afraid of, Ethan. This is your world. Cameras and publicists and crisis management. And now because of you, it's Amelia's world too." Amelia began to fuss, picking up on her mother's tension. Natalie bounced her gently, but her eyes never left Ethan's face. "I never wanted this for her," Natalie continued. "I wanted her to have a normal childhood, to be able to play at the park without worrying about photographers hiding in the bushes. And she can still have that. We just need to be smart about—" "Smart?" Natalie's laugh was bitter. "Smart would have been you thinking about these consequences before you decided to force your way back into our lives." The accusation hit its mark, and Ethan felt something crack inside his chest. "Are you saying you regret letting me back in?" Natalie was quiet for a long moment, and that silence was more devastating than any words could have been. "I don't know," she admitted finally. "I don't know what I regret anymore." Before Ethan could respond, there was a sharp knock at the door. They both froze. "Ms. Brooks?" This is Jennifer Walsh from Celebrity Insider. I was hoping we could chat about your relationship with Ethan Callaway. Natalie's face went white. The reporter was right outside her door, probably having slipped past building security. Ethan moved immediately, positioning himself between Natalie and the door. "Don't answer it," he said quietly. "Don't say anything. I'd love to hear your side of the story," the reporter continued through the door, "especially about your beautiful daughter. I'm sure our readers would be fascinated to know more about Mr. Callaway's family life." At the mention of Amelia, something primitive and protective flared in Ethan's eyes. He pulled out his phone and dialed security, speaking in sharp, clipped tones. "This is Ethan Callaway. I need a team at 1247 Pine Street, apartment 3B, immediately. There's an unauthorized individual harassing residents." Within minutes, they could hear raised voices in the hallway as building security and Ethan's team arrived to escort the reporter away. But the damage was done. Natalie's sanctuary had been violated. "This is just the beginning," Ethan said quietly, watching Natalie pace the small living room with Amelia. "Once the story breaks, it's going to get worse. Much worse. Then what do you suggest?" Natalie's voice was sharp with stress. "Because I can't afford to miss work and I can't afford a nanny, and I certainly can't afford to relocate my entire life because you're famous. You don't have to afford anything. Let me—" "No." She whirled to face him. Amelia clutched protectively against her chest. "I won't be your kept woman, Ethan. I won't be dependent on you for everything. That's not who I am anymore. That's not what I'm asking. Isn't it? You want to pay for security, for a safe house, for whatever it takes to make this problem go away. But what happens when the next crisis hits? And the next one? Do I just keep hiding behind your money and your influence while my daughter grows up thinking this is normal?" Ethan ran his hands through his hair, feeling the weight of impossible choices. "What do you want me to do, Natalie? I can't change who I am. I can't make the cameras disappear or turn back time to when I was nobody. Maybe that's the problem." Her voice was so quiet he almost didn't hear her. "Maybe you can't have both. Maybe you can't be Ethan Callaway, the billionaire, and Ethan, the father, and expect those worlds not to collide." The words hung between them like a death sentence. Ethan felt something vital breaking apart inside him as he realized what she was really saying. "You're asking me to choose." Natalie's eyes filled with tears, but her voice remained steady. "I'm asking you to think about what's best for Amelia. Really think about it. Because a father who brings chaos and danger into her life isn't better than no father at all." Amelia chose that moment to reach out toward Ethan, babbling Dada with perfect trust and love. The sound was like a knife to both their hearts. Ethan looked at his daughter, really looked at her, and saw himself reflected in her eyes. But he also saw the exhaustion in Natalie's face. The fear that had replaced the hope he'd seen just an hour earlier. "I need some air," he said roughly, grabbing his coat from the chair where he'd left it. "I need to think." "Ethan." But he was already at the door, pausing only to look back at the two people who meant more to him than his entire empire. "I love you both," he said simply. "That's the only thing I'm certain of right now." And then he was gone, leaving Natalie standing in her small apartment with their daughter in her arms and the crushing weight of an impossible decision settling over all of them. Outside, the sleet continued to fall, and somewhere in the city, printing presses were already running with the story that would change everything. The story broke at midnight. Ethan sat in his penthouse office, the city sprawling endlessly below him through floor-to-ceiling windows, as his phone buzzed with notifications every few seconds. The headline blazed across his laptop screen in bold letters: "Billionaire's secret baby, Ethan Callaway's hidden family revealed." The photos were worse than he'd imagined. Someone with a long-range lens had captured intimate moments from Christmas Eve, Natalie's face soft with surprise as she recognized him, Amelia reaching for her teddy bear, and most damaging of all, a shot of him holding his daughter with an expression of pure love and wonder. The accompanying article was a mixture of facts and speculation that made his stomach turn. They dug up details about Natalie's life, her job, her college education, even her parents' address in Oregon. But it was the final paragraph that made his blood run cold. Sources close to the situation suggest that Callaway has been secretly supporting Brooks and the child for months, leading to speculation about the nature of their relationship and whether this is simply another case of a wealthy man buying silence from a former lover. His phone rang, and Marcus Chen's name appeared on the screen. His lawyer sounded exhausted. "The story's gone viral," Marcus reported without preamble, trending on 3 social media platforms picked up by major news outlets. Rebecca's office has fielded 47 interview requests in the last 2 hours. "And Natalie?" Photographers have been camped outside her building since 4 a.m. Building management called the police twice, but they're staying on public property. Legally, there's not much we can do. Ethan closed his eyes, imagining Natalie trapped in her small apartment with Amelia, afraid to even look out the windows. What about the false information in the article? We can demand a retraction for the claim about financial support, but the damage is done. Social media has already decided she's either a gold digger or a victim, depending on which comment section you read. God. Ethan stood and walked to the window, looking down at the city where somewhere below, the woman he loved was paying the price for his past mistakes. I need to see her. Ethan, that's exactly what you shouldn't do right now. Any contact between you two will only fuel more speculation. I don't care about speculation, I care about Natalie and Amelia. Then think about what's best for them, Marcus said firmly. Going to her apartment now will only bring more cameras, more attention. Give it a few days for the initial frenzy to die down. But Ethan was already reaching for his keys. Some things are more important than good publicity. An hour later, he stood outside Natalie's building and Marcus had been right. The media presence was overwhelming. At least a dozen photographers and reporters clustered on the sidewalk, their equipment creating a small forest of lenses and microphones. As soon as they spotted him, the frenzy began. Mr. Calloway, can you comment on your relationship with Natalie Brooks? Is the child really yours? How long have you been supporting them financially? Ethan pushed through the crowd without a word, his security team creating a protective bubble around him. In the lobby, he could see the building manager wringing his hands nervously. Mr. Calloway, I'm so sorry about this situation. We've never had anything like this happen before. Is Ms. Brooks in her apartment? She hasn't left since yesterday. I feel terrible. Some of these reporters have been trying to bribe residents for information about her and the baby. The elevator ride to the third floor felt endless. When he finally reached Natalie's door, he knocked gently. Natalie, it's me. Silence stretched for long moments, and he wondered if she would refuse to let him in. When the door finally opened, he barely recognized the woman standing before him. Natalie looked like she hadn't slept. Her hair was disheveled, her eyes red-rimmed, and she wore the same clothes from the night before. But it was the expression on her face that broke his heart. A mixture of exhaustion, anger, and something that looked dangerously close to defeat. You shouldn't be here, she said without moving aside to let him in. I know, but I had to see if you were okay. Okay? Her laugh was sharp, brittle. I've had reporters calling my job, my parents, my college roommate. Someone posted my address on social media with speculation about how much money you're giving me. And I can't leave my apartment because there are cameras waiting to take pictures of my daughter. Ethan's jaw tightened. I'm going to fix this. How? You can't uninvent the internet, Ethan. You can't take back those photos or make people stop caring about your personal life. She stepped aside finally, letting him into the apartment. This is what I was afraid of. This is exactly why I knew we couldn't work. Inside, Amelia was napping in her playpen, blissfully unaware of the chaos surrounding her small world. Ethan looked at his daughter and felt something shift inside him, a clarity he'd been missing in the storm of crisis management and damage control. I've been thinking all night, he said quietly, about what you said, about whether I can have both worlds. Natalie wrapped her arms around herself, a gesture he recognized as self-protection. And, you're right, I can't be the father Amelia deserves and continue to live the way I've been living. Something has to change. What are you saying? Ethan took a deep breath, the weight of his decision settling over him like a mantle. I'm saying I choose you, both of you, whatever it takes. Ethan, I mean it. He moved closer, his voice gaining strength with each word. I'll step back from the company, sell my shares, resign from the board. I'll find a way to live quietly, privately. Because you're right. Amelia doesn't deserve to grow up in a fishbowl. Natalie stared at him, her green eyes wide with shock. You can't be serious. Your company is everything to you. No, he said simply. It was everything to me. Before I knew I had a daughter. Before I realized that all the money and power in the world doesn't mean anything if I can't protect the people I love. But your employees? Your investors? We'll be fine. The company can survive without me. But I can't survive without you and Amelia. He reached out tentatively, and when she didn't pull away, he cupped her face gently. I failed you once because I thought providing financially was more important than being present emotionally. I won't make that mistake again. Tears spilled down her cheeks. You'd really give it all up? For us? I'd give up everything for just one more day of what we had last night. Cooking dinner together, watching Amelia play, feeling like a family. For a moment, hope flickered in her eyes. But then reality crashed back and she stepped away from his touch. "It's too late," she whispered. "Even if you sell the company tomorrow, you'll always be Ethan Calloway. The cameras will always find us. And Amelia will always be the billionaire's daughter to the rest of the world. Then we'll deal with it together." "No." Her voice was firm despite the tears. "I won't ask you to destroy everything you've built. And I won't let my daughter grow up thinking love means sacrifice and hiding from the world." Ethan felt something dying inside his chest. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying maybe my therapist was right. Maybe some wounds are too deep to heal. Maybe some mistakes can't be forgiven, no matter how much we want them to be." "Natalie, please. I think you should go." She wrapped her arms around herself again, and this time it looked like armor. "Before the cameras outside realize you're here and make this even worse." Ethan looked at his daughter one last time, memorizing her peaceful face as she slept. When he looked back at Natalie, his voice was rough with emotion. "This isn't over," he said quietly. "I don't care how long it takes or what I have to do. I'm not walking away again. Not from either of you." "Then you'll be fighting this battle alone," she replied. "Because I'm done." As he rode the elevator down to face the cameras again, Ethan realized that winning Natalie back would require more than grand gestures or financial sacrifices. It would require proving that he could love them both enough to find a way to give Amelia the normal childhood her mother wanted, while still being the father his daughter deserved. And as the elevator doors opened to reveal the waiting media frenzy, he began to formulate a plan that would either save his family or cost him everything he'd worked for. The war for their future was just beginning. 2 weeks later, Natalie stood in her boss's office watching David Martinez flip through a stack of resignation letters that had been submitted by 3 major clients in the past 48 hours. "I'm sorry, Natalie," he said without looking up from the papers. "You know how much I value your work, but the media attention is affecting the entire firm. Clients are uncomfortable, productivity is down, and frankly, we can't afford to lose any more accounts. So you're firing me." Her voice was steady, professional, even though her world was crumbling around her. "I'm offering you a generous severance package and excellent references. But yes, effectively, I'm letting you go." David finally met her eyes, and she could see genuine regret there. The partners voted unanimously. "My hands are tied." Natalie walked out of the downtown office building in a daze, clutching a banker's box containing the few personal items from her desk. The photographers had mostly moved on to other stories, but she still spotted 2 lingering across the street, cameras ready. She'd been unemployed for exactly 47 minutes when her phone rang. "Ms. Brooks? This is Jennifer Walsh from Celebrity Insider. We spoke a few weeks ago. I'm not interested in... I'm calling with an offer. $50,000 for an exclusive interview about your relationship with Ethan Calloway. 1 hour. Your side of the story." Natalie stopped walking, the amount echoing in her head. $50,000 would cover her rent for a year, buy food and diapers and health insurance. It would give her time to find another job without the panic of impending bills. "I don't sell my privacy," she said finally. "Think about it," Jennifer pressed. "The story's already out there. This is your chance to control the narrative, to show the world who you really are instead of letting them speculate." After ending the call, Natalie sat on a bench in Occidental Park and tried to calculate how long her savings would last. 6 weeks? Maybe 8 if she was careful. After that, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Check your bank account." Frowning, she opened her banking app and nearly dropped her phone. Someone had deposited $100,000 into her checking account. The transfer note read simply, "For Amelia's future, E." Fury rose in her chest like a tidal wave. Without thinking, she dialed Ethan's number. "You arrogant, manipulative..." "Natalie?" His voice was cautious. "I take it you saw the deposit. How dare you?" She was practically shouting, drawing stares from other park visitors. "I told you I wouldn't be your kept woman. I told you. You told me you wouldn't ask me to support you. You never said I couldn't choose to help my daughter. Don't you dare make this about Amelia. This is about you trying to control me with money because you can't handle that I said no. Transfer it back then." The simple response deflated her anger slightly. "What? If it's really about independence and not pride, transfer it back. But before you do, think about what that money could mean for Amelia. Preschool, college fund, health insurance that actually covers pediatric specialists." Natalie closed her eyes, hating him for being right. "You're not playing fair. I'm playing for the only thing that matters." His voice softened. "How are you holding up?" Despite herself, she felt tears threatening. "I lost my job today. I'm sorry." And he sounded genuinely sorry, not triumphant. "That's my fault." "Yes, it is." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "Everything that's happening to us is your fault. I know, and I'm going to fix it. You can't fix this, Ethan. You can throw money at it, but you can't fix it. Watch me." Before she could ask what he meant, he'd hung up, leaving her alone with 100,000 questions and a bank account that would solve all her immediate problems, if she could swallow her pride enough to use it. That evening, as she fed Amelia dinner in their small kitchen, Natalie's phone rang again. This time it was her mother. "Honey, I just saw the news." "What news?" Natalie's stomach dropped. "Mom, please tell me you didn't talk to any reporters." "No, sweetheart. I'm calling about the other news. About Ethan." "What about Ethan?" "Turn on Channel 7. He's giving some kind of press conference." With mounting dread, Natalie turned on her small television and found the local news. There was Ethan, standing behind a podium in what looked like a conference room, facing a room full of reporters. He looked tired but determined, and when he spoke, his voice was clear and steady. "I've called this press conference to address the recent media speculation about my personal life," he began. 3 weeks ago, I discovered that I have a daughter with a woman I loved and lost due to my own failures. I want to be clear about several things." Natalie sank onto her couch, Amelia in her lap, transfixed by what she was seeing. "First, Natalie Brooks has never asked me for money, support, or anything else. She raised our daughter alone for over a year, because I wasn't man enough to stay and fight for our relationship when times got hard. The speculation that she's somehow taken advantage of me is not only false, it's insulting to one of the strongest, most principled women I've ever known." The camera flashed to the reporters who were scribbling furiously. "Second, effective immediately, I'm stepping down as CEO of Callaway Digital and selling my controlling stake in the company. I'll be transitioning to a consulting role that will allow me to work remotely and maintain my privacy." Gasps echoed from the press room, and Natalie felt her own sharp intake of breath. "But the most important thing I want to say," Ethan continued, looking directly into the camera as if he could see her through it, "is this. I'm sorry. I'm sorry to Natalie for leaving when she needed me most. I'm sorry to my daughter for missing the first 15 months of her life. And I'm sorry to both of them for bringing this chaos into their world." He paused, and when he continued, his voice was rough with emotion. "I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect a second chance. But I want the world to know that Natalie Brooks is not a scandal or a story or a source of speculation. She's a brilliant, independent woman who deserves to raise our daughter in peace. And if anyone has a problem with that, they can take it up with me, not her." The press conference continued with questions about the company transition and financial implications, but Natalie barely heard them. Her phone was buzzing constantly, texts from friends, calls from numbers she didn't recognize, notifications from social media. But it was a text from David Martinez that made her smile for the first time in weeks. "Saw the press conference. Partners want to discuss your return. Call me." As she put Amelia to bed that night, her daughter babbled contentedly, seemingly unaffected by the upheaval in their small world. But when Natalie looked at her, she saw Ethan's eyes staring back at her, curious, intelligent, trusting. "What do you think, baby girl?" she whispered. "Is Daddy trying to be the man we need him to be? Or is this just another grand gesture that won't last?" Amelia responded by grabbing her finger and holding tight, as if to say that sometimes love was worth the risk of being hurt again. But just as Natalie was beginning to think that maybe they could find a way forward together, her phone rang with a call that would change everything. "Ms. Brooks, this is Dr. Elizabeth Harper from Seattle Children's Hospital. I'm calling about Amelia's recent blood work from her wellness check." Natalie's blood turned to ice. "Is something wrong?" "We'd like you to bring her in tomorrow morning for some additional tests. There are some irregularities we want to investigate." As the doctor's words washed over her, Natalie realized that all their fights about money and privacy and second chances were about to become secondary to the only thing that truly mattered: their daughter's health. The pediatric wing of Seattle Children's Hospital smelled like disinfectant and barely suppressed fear. Natalie sat in the waiting room, Amelia sleeping restlessly in her arms, and tried not to think about all the terrible possibilities that could explain why they were here. Dr. Harper had been vague on the phone. Something about Amelia's white blood cell count being abnormal, the need for more comprehensive testing. But the way she'd scheduled the appointment for first thing the next morning, The urgency in her voice, despite her professional calm, had sent Natalie into a spiral of anxiety that kept her awake all night. She'd almost called Ethan a dozen times but stopped herself each time. This wasn't his crisis to share. He'd made his grand gestures and public declarations, but when it came down to real life, to doctor's appointments and waiting rooms, and the kind of fear that made your hands shake, she was still alone. Amelia stirred in her arms, whimpering softly, and Natalie automatically began the gentle swaying motion that had become second nature over the past 15 months. "Shh, baby girl. Mama's got you." "Natalie?" She looked up to find Ethan standing in the doorway of the waiting room, still wearing a suit from what must have been an early morning meeting. His hair was slightly mussed, as if he'd been running his hands through it, and his face was pale with worry. "How did you—" she began. "David Martinez called me. He said you'd requested emergency leave for a medical appointment with Amelia." Ethan's voice was careful, controlled, but she could hear the panic underneath. "I came as soon as I could. You didn't have to come." "Yes, I did." He sat down beside her, careful not to wake Amelia. "She's my daughter too, and whatever this is, we face it together." Before Natalie could respond, a woman in a white coat approached them. Dr. Harper was younger than Natalie had expected, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, and the sort of gentle competence that probably helped terrified parents get through the worst moments of their lives. "Ms. Brooks, I'm Dr. Harper, and you must be Mr. Calloway," she said, extending her hand to Ethan. "Thank you both for coming in so quickly. What's wrong with our daughter?" Ethan's voice was steady, but Natalie could feel the tension radiating from him. "Let's sit down," Dr. Harper said, gesturing to a quieter corner of the waiting room. "Amelia's routine blood work showed some irregularities that we want to investigate further. Her white blood cell count is elevated, and there are some other markers that concern us." Natalie felt the world tilt slightly. What does that mean? It could mean several things. An infection that her body is fighting off, an autoimmune response, or— Dr. Harper paused, choosing her words carefully. "We need to rule out some more serious possibilities." "Like what?" Ethan's voice was sharp now, the businessman in him demanding clear information. "Leukemia is one possibility we need to examine." The word hit Natalie like a physical blow. She heard herself make a small wounded sound, and suddenly Ethan's hand was covering hers, warm and steady and real. "But it's just one possibility," Dr. Harper continued quickly. "Children Amelia's age can have elevated white blood cell counts for a variety of reasons. We're going to do a more comprehensive blood panel today, and depending on those results, we may need to discuss a bone marrow biopsy." "A bone marrow biopsy?" Natalie's voice was barely a whisper. "On an 18-month-old baby? If it comes to that, we'll make sure she's as comfortable as possible. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. First, we'll do the blood work and see what we're dealing with." The next hour passed in a blur of procedures and paperwork. Amelia cried when they drew her blood, reaching for both her parents with the kind of desperate trust that broke their hearts. Ethan held her tiny hands while Natalie whispered soothing nonsense in her ear, and for those terrible minutes, all the anger and hurt between them fell away, leaving only the shared terror of parents who might lose their child. Afterward, they sat in another waiting room while the lab rushed Amelia's samples. Their daughter had finally fallen asleep, exhausted from crying, and Natalie stared down at her peaceful face, trying to memorize every detail. "She's going to be okay," Ethan said quietly. "You don't know that." "No," he admitted. "I don't. But I know she's strong, like her mother, and I know we're not going to face this alone." Natalie looked at him through tears she'd been holding back all morning. "I'm scared, Ethan." "So am I." He shifted closer, and when she didn't pull away, he wrapped his arm around her shoulders. "I'm terrified. But whatever this is, whatever happens, we're going to get through it together. I can't lose her." The words came out broken, desperate. "I can't." "You won't, we won't." His voice was fierce with a conviction he didn't entirely feel. "I won't let anything happen to her." They sat in silence for a while, watching Amelia sleep and trying not to think about all the ways their world could change in the next few hours. Eventually, Ethan spoke again. "I've been thinking about what you said, about the kind of father I want to be." "Ethan, we don't have to." "Yes, we do." He turned to face her fully. "Because sitting here watching her go through this, I realize that nothing else matters. Not the company, not the money, not even my pride. All that matters is being here for both of you in whatever way you'll let me." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I meant what I said at the press conference. I'm stepping back from everything that doesn't involve being Amelia's father and, if you'll let me, Your partner in this. Whatever this is. Natalie studied his face, looking for signs of the man who had walked away from her 3 years ago, when things got difficult. But all she saw was raw honesty, and a fear that matched her own. Partners? She repeated softly. In every way that matters. He hesitated, then continued. I know I have to earn back your trust. I know grand gestures and public apologies aren't enough to undo the damage I caused. But if you give me the chance, I'll prove that I can be the man you both need me to be. Before she could respond, Dr. Harper appeared in the doorway again. This time her expression was unreadable, and both parents felt their hearts stop. We have the results, she said simply. They followed her to a small consultation room, Ethan carrying Amelia, who had woken up cranky and clingy. Dr. Harper sat across from them with a file in her hands, and the silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. The good news, she began, is that we can rule out leukemia. Amelia's blood work doesn't show the markers we'd expect to see with that diagnosis. Relief flooded through Natalie so powerfully that she nearly collapsed. Beside her, she felt Ethan's body sag with the same overwhelming gratitude. However, Dr. Harper continued, she does have a significant infection that her body has been fighting. It's bacterial, probably something she picked up from daycare or a playground, but it's been going on longer than we'd like. Is it serious? Ethan asked. It's treatable with antibiotics, but it will require careful monitoring. Her immune system is a bit compromised right now, so we need to be aggressive about treatment and watch her closely for the next few weeks. What does that mean, practically? Natalie's voice was steadier now, the immediate terror having passed. Daily medications, weekly checkups, and keeping her away from large groups of children until the infection clears. No daycare for at least a month. Natalie's heart sank as she realized what that meant. No daycare meant no work, which meant no income, which meant, we'll figure it out, Ethan said quietly, reading her thoughts. Whatever we need to do, we'll figure it out. As they left the hospital an hour later, armed with prescriptions and follow-up appointments, Amelia babbling happily in her car seat, as if the morning's drama had never happened, Natalie found herself walking beside Ethan toward his car. I can drive you home, he offered. What about my car? I'll have someone pick it up later. He opened the passenger door for her, then carefully installed Amelia's car seat in the back. Right now, I just want to get you both home safely. Home. The word hung between them, loaded with possibility and pain. As Ethan drove through the Seattle streets toward her apartment, Natalie watched him in the rearview mirror, talking softly to Amelia, making her giggle despite the morning's ordeal. Maybe she was still afraid to trust him completely. Maybe there were still conversations they needed to have and wounds that needed healing. But watching him with their daughter, seeing the way he'd dropped everything to be here when she needed him most, Natalie realized something had shifted. For the first time in 3 years, she wasn't facing the future alone. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to start building something new. 3 weeks later, Natalie stood in her kitchen at 6 a.m., measuring Amelia's liquid antibiotic with the precision of a pharmacist. Their morning routine had become a careful dance of medications, temperature checks, and gentle monitoring, but their daughter was finally showing signs of real improvement. The infection was clearing, her energy was returning, and just yesterday, Dr. Harper had smiled for the first time since their initial consultation, declaring Amelia's latest blood work much more promising. What Natalie hadn't expected was how naturally Ethan had woven himself into their daily lives during Amelia's recovery. He'd started by offering to help with the medication schedule, then somehow evolved into the person who made breakfast, while she gave Amelia her morning dose. He'd taken over grocery shopping, claiming it was more efficient than her running errands with a sick toddler. He'd even learned to operate her temperamental washing machine, which had a particular cycle that worked best for Amelia's sensitive skin. The domestic intimacy of it all should have felt strange, overwhelming, but instead, it felt like coming home to a life she'd almost forgotten was possible. Coffee's ready, Ethan said softly, appearing in the kitchen doorway. He was dressed for another day of remote work, casual but polished, and he moved around her small space with the confidence of someone who belonged there. Thank you. She accepted the mug he handed her, noting that he'd prepared it exactly the way she liked, light cream, no sugar. You don't have to keep doing this, you know? Doing what? Taking care of us. She gestured around the kitchen, where he'd quietly organized everything over the past few weeks, making their chaotic life somehow run smoother. I know this isn't what you signed up for when you decided you wanted to be a father. Ethan was quiet for a moment, watching Amelia play with her breakfast, getting more yogurt on her face than in her mouth. When he finally spoke, his voice was thoughtful. "Do you remember our first Christmas together? When you had food poisoning from that seafood place?" Natalie smiled despite herself. "You held my hair back while I was sick and then slept on the bathroom floor to make sure I was okay. And you kept apologizing for ruining Christmas, like getting sick was somehow your fault." He met her eyes across the small kitchen. "But I remember thinking that this was what love looked like. Not the grand gestures or perfect moments, but showing up when someone needs you, even when it's messy and unglamorous. Ethan, I walked away from that once," he continued. "I convinced myself that love meant protecting you from my failures instead of fighting through them together. I won't make that mistake again." Amelia chose that moment to throw a spoonful of yogurt, which landed squarely on Ethan's shirt. Instead of being annoyed, he laughed, a sound that had become more frequent over the past few weeks. "Nice aim, princess," he said, cleaning her hands with a wet wipe. "We're definitely going to work on your table manners." The casual use of "we" sent something warm through Natalie's chest. Over the past 3 weeks, she'd watched Ethan transform from the polished billionaire she'd seen on magazine covers into something more genuine. A man who could change diapers at 3 a.m. without complaint, who knew which stuffed animal would calm Amelia during a fever, who had learned to make her laugh even when she felt terrible. "I got a call from Dr. Harper yesterday," Natalie said, settling into the chair beside him. "Amelia's cleared to go back to daycare next week." Something flickered across Ethan's face. Disappointment, maybe, or loss. "That's great news. You must be relieved to get back to normal." "Normal." Natalie tested the word, finding it strange on her tongue. "I'm not sure I remember what that looks like anymore." "I know the feeling." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching Amelia attempt to feed herself while making an impressive mess. Finally, Natalie spoke again. "I've been thinking about what you said at the press conference, about stepping back from the company. What about it? Was it real? Or was it just something you said to get the media off our backs?" Ethan turned to face her fully, his expression serious. "It was real. I've already transferred my shares to Marcus and the board. I'm keeping a consulting position that lets me work from anywhere, but the day-to-day operations aren't my responsibility anymore. Don't you miss it? The power, the control, the 18-hour days, the constant travel, the pressure to choose work over everything else that matters?" He shook his head. "I thought I would miss it more than I do. But every morning when I wake up and know I'm going to see you and Amelia, I remember why I made that choice." Natalie felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. "What if this doesn't work out? What if we try and fail? You've given up everything for a family that might not even—" "Hey!" He reached across the table and took her hand. "Look at me." When she met his eyes, they were steady, certain. "I didn't give up everything. I chose everything that matters. There's a difference." His thumb traced across her knuckles, a gesture so familiar it made her chest ache. "Besides, we're not failing. We're here, together, figuring it out one day at a time." "Are we together?" The question came out smaller than she'd intended. "I mean really together, because I don't know what we are anymore, Ethan. We're not dating, we're not married, we're parents," he said simply. "Everything else we can figure out, but that—" He gestured toward Amelia, who was now singing nonsense syllables to her yogurt cup. "That's permanent. That's real. And it's more than I ever thought I'd be lucky enough to have." Natalie was quiet for a long moment, processing his words. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I'm scared to trust you again. I know. I'm scared that this is just you playing house until something more interesting comes along." "I know that too." "Then how do we move forward?" Ethan was quiet for a moment, then stood and walked to where his jacket hung by the door. From the inner pocket, he pulled out a small velvet box that made Natalie's breath catch in her throat. "This isn't what you think it is," he said quickly, returning to the table. "I'm not proposing. I know we're not there yet. And I know you need more time to trust me again." He opened the box to reveal a simple silver band set with a small diamond. Beautiful but understated. Nothing like the ostentatious engagement ring he might have bought 3 years ago. "This is a promise," he said. "A promise that I'm not going anywhere, that I'm going to show up every day in whatever way you'll let me, that I'm going to earn back your trust one breakfast, one doctor's appointment, one yogurt-covered morning at a time." Natalie stared at the ring, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Ethan, you don't have to say yes. You don't have to say anything. But I need you to know that this—" He gestured between them, encompassing the small kitchen, the domestic chaos, their daughter singing to her breakfast. This is what I want. Not someday, not when everything is perfect, but right now, exactly as messy and complicated as it is. For a moment, the only sound in the kitchen was Amelia's happy babbling. Then slowly, Natalie extended her right hand. Not my left hand, she said, as he slid the ring onto her finger. I'm not ready for that kind of promise yet. But this hand, she looked down at the simple band, then back up at him. This hand is willing to try. The smile that spread across Ethan's face was like sunrise after the longest night of the year. That's all I need, he said, just the chance to try. It's to... Later that morning, as they walked through Pike Place Market with Amelia in her stroller, a family outing that had become routine over the past few weeks, Natalie found herself thinking about second chances and the courage it took to believe in them. They weren't perfect. They still had conversations to have, wounds to heal, trust to rebuild. But as she watched Ethan help Amelia pick out flowers at a vendor's stall, his face soft with the kind of love that had nothing to do with obligation and everything to do with choice, she thought maybe perfect wasn't the point. Maybe the point was showing up. Maybe the point was choosing love over fear, hope over self-protection, partnership over pride. Maybe the point was coming home, not to a place, but to the people who made everywhere feel like home. As they headed back toward her apartment, Amelia fell asleep in her stroller, exhausted from the morning's adventure. Ethan reached for Natalie's hand, and she let him take it, silver ring catching the afternoon light. One day at a time, he asked softly. One day at a time, she agreed. And for the first time in 3 years, the future felt like something worth fighting for. 18 months later, the autumn air in Seattle carried the scent of coffee and fallen leaves as Natalie pushed Amelia's stroller down the familiar sidewalk toward Cornerstone Café. At exactly 3 years old, their daughter had grown into a chatty, curious toddler who insisted on walking part of the way herself, stopping to examine every interesting leaf or sidewalk crack along the route. "Daddy meet us Café?" Amelia asked for the third time, her vocabulary having exploded over the past year into full sentences that never failed to amaze both her parents. "Yes, baby girl. Daddy's meeting us at the cafe," Natalie confirmed, checking her watch. They were running a few minutes late, but Ethan would wait. He always waited. The past 18 months had been a journey of small victories and daily choices. There had been setbacks, moments when old fears crept in, when Natalie wondered if she was being naive to believe that people could truly change, when the weight of single motherhood she'd carried for so long made her retreat into old patterns of self-protection. But there had been so many more moments of grace. Ethan learning to braid Amelia's hair after watching YouTube tutorials, the three of them building pillow forts on rainy Sundays. Natalie's gradual realization that the man who had walked away 3 years ago was not the same man who now knew exactly how to make Amelia laugh when she was cranky, or how to talk Natalie through her anxiety attacks with the same calm patience he brought to everything else. They'd moved in together 6 months ago, not to his penthouse, which he'd sold, but to a modest house in Queen Anne with a yard where Amelia could play and a home office where they could both work. It was nothing like the mansion Ethan could have afforded, but it was theirs in a way that felt real and earned. The cafe came into view, and through the window, Natalie could see Ethan already seated in their usual corner booth. Not the same one where he'd spent those lonely Christmases, but a new spot they'd claimed together, one that felt like possibility rather than regret. "There's Daddy," Amelia squealed, pressing her face against the glass as they approached the door. Ethan looked up at the sound of her voice, and his face lit up with the kind of unguarded joy that still caught Natalie off guard sometimes. He stood as they entered, scooping Amelia into his arms and spinning her around until she dissolved into giggles. "Hello, my beautiful girls," he said, kissing the top of Amelia's head before leaning down to brush his lips against Natalie's cheek. "Perfect timing. I just ordered." "Hot chocolate," Amelia announced. "With marshmallows." "With marshmallows," Ethan confirmed solemnly. "And extra whipped cream, because it's a special day." Natalie settled into the booth across from him, watching as he helped Amelia out of her tiny jacket with the kind of practiced ease that spoke of hundreds of similar moments. The simple silver band on her right hand caught the afternoon light. She still wore it there, a reminder of the promise they were still keeping, day by day. "So," Ethan said once Amelia was settled with her coloring books, "I have news. Good news or bad news? Depends on how you feel about change." His smile was mysterious, tinged with excitement. "The documentary about corporate responsibility that I've been consulting on? They want to offer me a permanent position as an executive producer." Natalie raised her eyebrows. That sounds like good news. Why the dramatic buildup? Because it would mean traveling sometimes. Nothing like my old schedule, maybe once a month, never more than a week at a time. But it would mean being away from you and Amelia occasionally. Natalie considered this, surprised to find that the prospect didn't fill her with panic the way it might have a year ago. What do you want to do? I want to take it. The work is meaningful, it pays well, and it's the kind of challenge that makes me excited to get up in the morning. But only if you're okay with it. Only if we can make it work for our family. Our family. The phrase still sent warmth through her chest, even after all this time. I think we can make it work, she said. Amelia and I are pretty good at taking care of ourselves when we need to. I know you are. That's one of the things I love most about you. You never needed me to rescue you. You just needed me to show up and be present for the life we were building together. Before Natalie could respond, Amelia looked up from her coloring. Daddy, when you go to work far away, you come back? Ethan's expression grew serious as he met his daughter's earnest gaze. Always, Princess. I will always come back to you and Mommy. That's a promise. Pinky promise? Pinky promise. He extended his little finger, and Amelia wrapped hers around it with the gravity of someone sealing the most important contract in the world. As they sat in the comfortable warmth of the cafe, sharing hot chocolate and watching Amelia color outside the lines with determined concentration, Natalie found herself thinking about the strange circles life could draw. 3 years ago, this place had represented everything she'd lost. 2 years ago, it had been where hope went to die quietly over cold coffee. Now it was where they came to celebrate small victories, to make decisions as a family, to maintain the traditions that grounded them in something larger than just the daily chaos of loving each other. Penny for your thoughts? Ethan asked, following her gaze around the familiar space. Just thinking about how different everything is from what I planned. Better or worse? Natalie looked at him, really looked at him. The fine lines around his eyes that spoke of laughter more than stress these days. The way he automatically cut Amelia's muffin into the exact bite-sized pieces she preferred. The silver ring on his own right hand that matched hers, a symbol of promises kept and trust rebuilt one day at a time. Different, she said finally, but better, much better. Later that evening, after Amelia was asleep in her own bed in their shared home, Natalie and Ethan sat on their back porch, wrapped in blankets against the October chill. The house was quiet except for the distant sound of traffic and the soft hum of the baby monitor. I love our life, Ethan said suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence. Even the 6 a.m. wake-up calls? Even the tantrums over the wrong color cup? Especially those. He pulled her closer and she settled against his side with the kind of ease that came from thousands of nights like this one. Even the pediatrician visits and the grocery store meltdowns and all the beautifully ordinary chaos that comes with being someone's dad. And someone's... Natalie let the question hang between them. Someday, Ethan said softly, understanding what she wasn't quite ready to ask. When you're ready. When we're both sure that the promises we're making are the forever kind. She twisted the silver ring around her finger, thinking about forever. Once upon a time, the word had terrified her. Too much risk. Too many ways for people to leave. But sitting here in the life they'd built together, promise by promise, day by day, forever felt less like a leap of faith and more like the natural conclusion to a story that had always been heading toward home. I think, she said carefully, I might be getting ready. Ethan's arms tightened around her, and she could feel his smile against her hair. Yeah? Yeah. Not tomorrow, not next week, but someday soon, maybe. They sat in the gathering darkness, holding on to each other and the life they'd fought to build while inside their house. Their daughter slept safely, dreaming whatever dreams children have when they're surrounded by love. Some love stories begin with passion and end with heartbreak. Others start with friendship and grow into something deeper. But the best ones, the ones that last, begin with two people choosing each other again and again through all the messy, complicated, beautiful ordinariness of building a life together. This was that kind of love story. And as the Seattle sky grew dark above them and the city settled into evening around them, Natalie Calloway-to-be and Ethan Calloway held tight to the promise that the best was yet to come. Sometimes the greatest love stories are found in the simplest moments. A cafe on Christmas Eve, a child's laughter, the choice to try again when everything seems lost. Love isn't always about grand gestures or perfect timing. Sometimes it's about showing up, day after day, for the people who make everywhere feel like home. What would you have done if you were Natalie? Would you have been brave enough to give love a second chance when the first one ended in heartbreak? Your participation means a lot to the channel. Please share your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to our channel and leave a comment below letting us know what you thought. Your feedback and support mean a lot to us. Stay tuned for more exciting stories.